20 owners, independently owners who brings various different IT expertise. We have about 650 technical resources that we can tap into. We have a lot of industry leading expertise in both IT and cybersecurity. A little bit about myself. I have 2 kids. They're both grown, so that kind of freaked me out to do this crazy thing that we call owning a business. And I'm a husband of a very loving wife. I've been married 33 years. I should say that with a lot more excitement. I feel old when I say this. I know I look very young, but I've been in the IT business for 30 plus years.
Wow.
And 21 of those years I worked for Capital Group, which is the parent company for American Funds. They're the 2nd largest mutual fund shop in the US. The reason why that's relevant is because I spent many years in cybersecurity with them, and they spend a lot of money in their cybersecurity discipline. So I bring a lot of expertise from there. I mentioned that I decided to become a business owner about a year ago, and I'm the owner of Team Logic IT here in Cerritos. Well, technically we're in Norwalk, but we're right next door. I'm what they call a certified information system security professional. That I guess makes me somewhat of an expert in the cybersecurity field. So that's a little bit about myself. Before I dive into the presentation, I actually struggle with the content quite a bit because at first I thought I was just going to talk about all the various different threats, and then I started counting the number of topics. It would have needed 2 hours, like Scott mentioned. Then I thought, okay, let me talk about the other side, the type of defenses that you should implement. And then there's a whole laundry list of that. So I was like, okay, forget this. I'm just gonna do it my way. Which is I'm gonna touch upon different aspects of both the threat and defense, and this being a small crowd, I'd like to be more interactive. If you have specific questions when I touch upon some of these things, we can skip ahead, or we can spend more time in each individual topics. Typically, I was telling Scott earlier, typically I do these 30-minute lunch and learns with my customers, and we focus on one single topic. So having 60 minutes is a little challenging to sort of figure out what topic to kind of bring. But I picked a few that I feel that it's educational and it's kind of interesting as well. What I thought I want to talk about first is cybersecurity is kind of what you hear about in the media, but really what's behind cybersecurity is the whole concept of information security. Information security is a lot more encompassing. So I'll talk about, so the relationship between cybersecurity is about protecting your data from cyber threats, right? So essentially, pretty much everything, most things coming from the internet. Information security is a larger discipline. It's talking about protecting data from all the threats. So when we think about natural disasters, when we think about somebody physically breaking into your office and stealing files out of your file cabinet, those are sort of included in the holistic information security. So I'll touch upon information security a little bit, and because it's actually a very simple concept, and we talk about a lot of different threats and different protection mechanisms, but at the end of the day, you're trying to achieve 3 things. So the information security triad, so there are only 3 things you really want to think about, right? Everything that you want to try to protect within the data or information realm is related to one of these 3. So the first one is confidentiality, right? That's kind of obvious. The second one is integrity of your data. The third one that's often overlooked, especially when we talk about cybersecurity, is availability of your data. So confidentiality is really preventing people from reading your data, right? So it's a read access. And what's interesting is most industries that are regulated, so the healthcare industry, the credit card processing industry, the defense industry, most of the compliance deals with this aspect of information security. So keeping things confidential, right? So your data, they want to keep it from being exposed, unauthorized access to your data. So the other two aspects, oh, by the way, did I mention that the 3 letters CIA, so it's kind of easy. So integrity. Integrity, this is about updating your data, right? Writing to your data. So, you need to think about, in terms of information security, do you have enough mechanisms to protect, either people or systems from unintentional modification of your data. So this is more about write access. So in information security as well as cybersecurity, access control is a key discipline, right? So who gets to do what? And integrity side is more about the right, the ability to update data. Availability. Like I said, this is kind of the often overlooked part of information security. Most people think they have it covered, and really this is about, for your business, you want to ask yourself a few questions such as, how long can you operate without access to either your system or data, right? It's a question that you really should ask yourself. Is it 2 hours? Is it half a day? Is it a whole day, or is it a week? Right? If your computer goes out, can you continue to operate? Right? So some businesses, they can operate by hand and paper based. Some businesses rely on their system so much they can't go without for more than an hour. The second thing you want to ask is, a lot of people think they have backups, and the interesting about backups is actually backups is not interesting. The interesting about backup is actually restore, right? You can back up all you want, but you can't restore. You're wasting your time. So, so asking the question is, well, how long does it take for you to restore from your backup? And in that period of time, you're out of operations, right? So, coupled with the first question is, again, from a business perspective, how long can you do without? And then when you restore, the assumption is you're going to lose some data, right? Because if you back up once a week, and your worst case scenario is you can restore, but you have lost a week of data. Even if you restore, is that sufficient? So, when we think about backup and restore, you can't just do it willy-nilly just because, your neighbor does it this way. You shouldn't just, follow suit. You should think about these questions. So at the end of the day, the recommendation is for you to ask these questions now, instead of when you need to ask that question, which is the point that you actually have to restore. Right. So that was just sort of a larger overview of the CIA's information security, and those are the bases for us to kind of start thinking about cybersecurity. Right? So in the topic of cybersecurity, I thought I'd share some interesting facts. 95% of cybersecurity breaches are due to human error or unintentional. So that's actually a pretty significant statistics. The other interesting statistics for small business owners is almost 60% of their employees would take your confidential information with them when they leave. Absolutely, that's huge.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and, 60%, so what are you doing to, at least minimize the impact, right? I've talked to a lot of small business owners who essentially leave their files wide open. Everybody can access every file and read every file and write every file. That's kind of interesting, if you couple that with that's that. Small business owners, a lot of times we feel that it's not, we're so small, who wants to attack us? So a couple of stats in here. So, 43% of the cyber attacks are actually targeted against small business, specifically targeted. And 62% of companies have experienced phishing and or social engineering attacks, right? So that's almost 2/3. I've experienced it. A lot of my clients have experienced it. They've sent me phishing emails, and so related to small businesses. Why small businesses? We often think, well, we're so small, we're either not a target, or even if we're breached, the impact is small. But the thing is, small businesses oftentimes work with larger businesses. Back in 2003, Target had a major breach. You've probably forgotten about that now because there's just so many large breaches since then. But what was interesting was Target was not actually directly breached. The breach came from a small, air conditioning company, and who had a network access to Target. And they breached the small company, and through the network pipe, they were able to get to Target. So even small businesses, I think we need to consider cybersecurity. So then it was like, okay, I'm going to talk about cybersecurity, and there's so much stuff, right? There's so much stuff to talk about. So I want to cover sort of two sides of cybersecurity, and these are bad guys, and what they're trying to do is get to your data, right? They essentially, and just like robbers and thieves, they have burglars. They have two approaches. They can use the brute force approach, right? They can directly try to break in, hack against your firewall, look for vulnerabilities. Or if they're patient, they can use this thing called, advanced persistent threat, where they escalate they get into a site door and they try to work essentially room to room over a long period of time. The other thing is, phishing and social media. They trick you. They trick a employee or an end user into giving out access or information. So I'm going to talk about a couple of more prevalent threats. So the number one threat, the absolute number one threat, is actually your good employees. So these are employees that we're not even talking about the 60% that when they quit, they walk away with their data. These are the trusted employees that work really hard, but the issue is, according to a survey, 3/4 of them claim that they actually know the risk, right? So you hear about cybersecurity and all these risks and what to do about it all the time, and you're not supposed to click on things, but 75% of them still do it, right? Even though they claim that they all understand it. And so reflecting back on the CIA, just think about for any specific business, what kind of impact would your employee pose for you? Again, if you have good access control, then maybe you can minimize the impact. Even this is a fact that you may not be able to do anything about. But you may be able to kind of at least change that a little bit. So phishing, you all know what phishing is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys all gotten a phishing email?
Oh, yes.
Sure.
Do you guys all click that
No.
phishing email?
No.
No.
Okay.
Delete, delete, delete.
So, phishing is, the bad guy sending an email to somebody, and, somebody just clicks it, and then, through the mechanism, it introduces, it kind of either a virus or some malware, and allow them to sort of take control, for whatever purpose that they were coming after. So suspicious email, you guys all know this, we can kind of blow through this. Most suspicious emails are obvious. Seriously, the ones that people sent me, I can almost tell immediately that, so they either come from a fake sender, and generally the text body wouldn't have your name in it, right? And, so it starts with generic, kind of greeting, dear sir, madam, or whatever. And within the content, there may be an attachment, don't click that, you may have a link. Oftentimes, these come from non-US locations, so, Google Translate, they can translate the words, but grammar sometimes doesn't come across really well. There's often some kind of scare tactic, or enticement, if you will, associated with it. So, do become suspicious. Couple of examples. So over here, this email, this is a Google email, and it claims to have come from Facebook support. But the first thing that you look at is this email address. This email address does not come from Facebook.com. So that's a dead giveaway. They're, pretty generic message. Facebook should know your name because you gave me your name. But before you click anything, you always hover, right? Hover your mouse on top of this and look at the where it's about to take you. So another example, this looks very official, seems to have come from Netflix, but if you look at the email address, even though it says Netflix here, what you want to look at is the domain name. So this actually is from a domain called mailer.com and not netflix.com. So that's already a dead giveaway. Pretty generic information, and then if anybody asks for your payment information, you just gotta be careful. And then when you hover, this kb4.io, I don't know where that's gonna take you, so don't click. So if you're a business owner and you're thinking about, okay, well, I know this, but how do I get my employees to not only know this, but also make sure that they don't click. So one of the things you can do is you can bring on these phishing, these simulated phishing services. Most of these services can offer online training, so you can get employee trained. And after the training, they would actually send some fake phishing email to check their response. If you're in the defense industry, or the defense contracting industry, so DFARS compliant actually require employee training, so oftentimes we deploy this so that you not only get trained, but also you get some exercise, right? So if you get phishing email often enough, you kind of get used to not clicking it, especially when you get a report from your boss that you just click a couple.
Nice.
Yeah, and a funny story.
What if the boss clicks it?
Uh-oh.
Well, okay, so the funny story was I'm pretty good at this stuff, right? I mean, this is my area of expertise. But my CISO, so CISO is Chief Information Security Officer. My CISO decided to test us out. So the senior managers who are responsible for a lot of the different aspects of cybersecurity. and he sent us what's called a spear phishing.
Mhm.
So spear phishing now gets a little hard to tell, right? Because the email appears to have come from him. He knows our email system internally, so he knows how to trick our email system to display his photo. And he talked about a topic that only him and I knows about. And he calls me out by name. So I actually clicked it, but as soon as I clicked it, I knew it was bad, and of course, he never let me. But I wasn't the only person that fell for that. So spear phishing, it's very intentional. It's directed to you. There's still ways to tell, and the source email address wouldn't look right. But unfortunately, Outlook like to hide the source email address for you. So you have to know how to actually look at the source email address. But that gets a little, pretty advanced. This is generic stuff. Most threats are pretty generic, so getting into sort of a discipline of just kind of watching out for these things would greatly reduce your risk or your exposure. So insofar as the people aspect, and again, this is on the business side, but it may also apply to individual personal stuff, right? So a couple of things, password, we recommend strong password, and do not reuse password. And in the next slide, I'm gonna show you why. And do not share passwords. It's something that I actually had a hard time still trying to convince some of my clients. A lot of my clients, they'd like to know what their employees' passwords are, and they actually keep them in a spreadsheet. So I'm still working on that. So information. So you want to think about information. I talked a lot about data. But data and information are actually not the same. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about it, because your data can be exposed, but you want to figure out, how to protect your information. Email it's awful. Email is a bad thing. So you want to be real careful when you send stuff to other people through email. The main reason is once you send an email out, you can't recall it. You don't know where it can go. People can forward it. People can store it forever, and you just lost control of it. So try not to share valuable information through email if possible. Or if you do, try to break it up. And I'll kind of talk about it a little bit in the next following slides. This next one, actually, this is pretty generic for your employees, as well as just even you going on vacation in a hotel room and Starbucks. Public Wi-Fi is scary. If you have to use public Wi-Fi, make sure you have some kind of VPN protection, so that and I'll kind of play a video towards the end. I'm showing you why. USB drives. Don't trust them for your life. USB drives is really scary for me, because I have to have complete full possession of a USB device for me to even want to put it into my computer. Because USB drive is so easy to introduce viruses and malware through, and also it's such a easy way for you to lose data. You copy something in the thumb drive 6 months ago, you forgot what you copied on it, and then you just left it at a convention somewhere, and all of a sudden your data is exposed. So keep real close tab on your USB drive that you own. If you find a USB drive on the parking lot that has I don't know, my banking information, whatever, don't stick it in your computer. It's actually one of the common tricks, especially in the aerospace and defense industry. That, foreign agents would, go to, the parking lot of Boeing and sprinkle a few, USB drives, as a way for them to kind of penetrate. Yeah, I just imagine, if you said, well, we'll use new photos or something. I mean, it's it actually happened. Maybe not by that exact name, but, it's so easy for you to forget that. And this way, in a lot of large enterprises would disable the USB ports, by default. But that's just something interesting. So be real careful of USB drives. Your portable devices, your laptops, your tablets, your phones, this is about your employees, right? Because your employee probably these days all get, email on their phones, right? It's very convenient. But at least make sure that they're password protected, and and it's encrypted, right? Alright, so Scott's actually seen something like this, I think. So this is a report that I ran on a particular client that I have, and I blacked out the domain names. So you guys heard of the dark web. So dark web dark web is nothing to be scared about. It's really just I want to say a corner, but it's actually a pretty big corner of the internet where, if you know how to get into, you can actually find a lot of interesting things in there. So one of the things you can find is your credentials for sale, so your username and password. So I pulled this up because this is kind of an interesting example of a couple of things. Number one is the red highlighted account. So this is Jeff P, whoever he is. So keep in mind, this is a company account, right? So Jeff P used the company account and probably created at least 4 separate internet accounts. And he used pretty much the same password. Now this tool doesn't show me the full password, it just shows you the first 4 letters. But just from the pattern, slab, these are all pretty much the same password. Now, this is one page, right? So this date is when that credential went on sale in the dark web. So, you have August 2016, and here is January 2018, so a year and a half later. Another breach and exposed another credential, and you can see that it's the same username and password. So what could happen? So when I look at something like this, I wonder what happened between this time and this time, because somebody purchased this credential, he can start trying to hit against Citibank, Chase, whatever bank account. Password, right? And he can just gain access to a lot of his accounts, 34 whatever. And now, so you see these kind of passwords. So I talked about strong passwords, right? This is a hash, so it's an encrypted form of password. If you have a strong password, it could take a bad actor days to crack this password. But if you have a very weak password, like ABC123, it will take them less than a second. So, when your credential is exposed in this form, if you have a strong password, and if you're not using the same password, you're probably okay. When you see something like this, you go and change the password if it tells you what the website is. But if you have a weak password, you might as well have just given them your plain text password. All right. So this is just kind of an interesting case. And again, these are business email accounts.
Regis, are you saying that this is saved somewhere? So even if you change it, it's still accessible?
Right, but if you change it, then this is no good anymore, right? They, you know, if let's say Jeff goes in and change all his internet accounts to, you know, to different passwords, right? Then, you know, if somebody buys this credential, then that's no longer a valid credential, right? So changing passwords, you know, periodically and kind of managing the password is kind of an important thing.
Got it.
And Regis, since my board chair's in the room, Regis did, one of the first times we met, he did run this on my account, or on the chamber.
On the chamber.
On the chamber, and he came in, he said, we're pretty good. And I don't know if that's because no one on the dark web really
Well, I think what
cares,
happened,
or.
I think what happened was most of the hits were no longer working at the
Yeah.
chamber.
Yeah,
But still, you know,
for a long time.
you gotta remember the credentials need to be removed from whatever accounts in
That's a good point, too.
What's actually interesting is, what I noticed was this website. So you have at least 2 employees using your business account, and you know, I'll leave that comment to myself. And it does happen. So this is just, you know, it's a real example of you know, because if they use their business accounts for personal websites and all that stuff, and they use the same credential to access your, I don't know, QuickBooks Online or whatever, and all of a sudden your business is exposed. Okay, so this is actually kind of a quiz. Which data in this list is valuable to the attack actors?
Pretty much everything.
All of them.
Yeah. Thank you. It's all of them. But I also want to point out that individually, these are not as valuable. So these are bits of data. But when we talk about information security, right, information and data, so information consists of one or more pieces of data. So just kind of, you know, imagine if somebody got a hold of your social security number, and only your social security number, it's really just a pattern of, you know, 9 numbers.
Right.
Now, but if they get a hold of your social security number and your name, all of a sudden, that becomes a lot more valuable. You know, your mother's maiden name, actually, you know, people forget about all these things, and, you know, in your social media, you talk about what school you went to, and, you know, you may post, you know, something about, this is my childhood best friend, and I just found them. Well, you just remember all the security questions that you
Yes.
have to answer, right? So, you know, just kind of remember what you say in social media, you know, because those kind of information actually is kind of easy to kind of find out, if especially if somebody want to target against you. So information is what criminals are after, but they don't mind getting, you know, individual pieces of data as well, because they sometimes can piece different things together. All right, so let's talk a little bit about hackers. They're really good at what they do, but we make their life easier as well. So I want to point out this configure worm. It's kind of one of my favorite worms because the purest of intention. Unlike a lot of the more modern viruses and malware, this was done 10 plus years ago. Let's say almost like a the creator's intent wasn't to do any of this stuff. The creator's intent was to create something that would propagate and live forever. Right? It's just kind of a pride thing. So this is a very effective worm, and it's been out there for 10 plus years. It's still infecting machines across the world. And it's starting to kind of, you know, wind down. It's so well known, you know, everybody have, you know, even Microsoft has effective protection mechanism against it for a very long time now. But now we're talking about people who still running, you know, Windows XP, for instance, you know, but still, it's still infecting all over the world. So really your goal, you know, to try to protect yourself against hackers is, you know, you wanna, you know, identify all known attack vectors and eliminate all your weaknesses. You wanna be able to predict all your future attack vectors and eliminate all of that. And you may wanna deploy honeypots and countermeasures so that you can hit them back, you know. And you wanna spend about $100 million a year. No. Well, yeah, so that number is actually what the Capital Group spent
Wow.
a year. Jeez. Yeah, because they have $1.8 trillion under management. You just imagine how valuable the data they have to protect and how big of a target they are. But small and medium businesses, I think most of them don't have this kind of budget.
No,
And if you do, I definitely want to talk to you.
I was gonna say, isn't that you're walking around with?
Yeah, no. Really, the goal is to make it harder to pick on you than your easier neighbors or your competitors, right? Because you can't spend the kind of money to make yourself, I mean, even the Capital Group, it's not 100%. I mean, we're continuing, you know, we were continuously enhancing our protection. You can't afford that kind of protection, but there's some basic stuff that would take you to the 98, 99%, fairly easily actually. So at least do that, and then maybe consider doing the basics, but you know, maybe add a little more, just so that you're less easy, you're more difficult than your neighbors, so they go and pick on your neighbors. So what are some of the basics? Patch and update. It's so easy these days. It just takes some effort, right? Or you find a partner like us. We essentially, you know, ensure that everything is patched and up to date. You know, one of the key things that people often forget is like routers, right? You get a router from, I don't know, AT&T or Frontier, and it just sits there and never gets patched. And you know, some router vulnerabilities that are pretty well known, that you know they're actively being exploited. You know, consider implementing a real firewall. You know, so a lot of routers actually do some of the old, has some of the firewall capabilities from the old days, but a more modern firewall can actually examine packets coming in and out and maybe block certain websites. Even if you accidentally click a phishing email, you know, your firewall may have a chance of blocking it. So antivirus, anti-malware, I think everybody has it. You know, Windows, you know, came out with the Windows Defender, and it's not that good, but at least it's something. But what the problem is, a lot of the antivirus and anti-malware is not centrally managed. So if it's not centrally managed, what it means is it may not get the updates when you need it, or it's definitely not updated in real time, and it could be disabled by your employees, either intentionally or by accident, and then you wouldn't even know about it, right? You think you're protected because you have antivirus installed, but it's actually not running. So you want to have some kind of centralized managed patch, and we're going to talk about it. And again, this is for the same thing, right? So you leave it to individual, you know, employees and users to do the patching. Sometimes they don't do it. Another thing to consider is some form of centralized mobile device management, right? Especially if your employee use mobile device for a lot of their critical work, right? Laptops. They do a lot of work on laptops. You know, we talk about access management. You know, you kind of need to lay it out based on the CIA principle. You know, who can read data, who can update data, and then so the principle of least privileged, which means only give a person as much access as the person needs to do their job. And, so, you know, we talked about the password complexity and, you know, enforce some changes. A little more, you know, password management is kind of a thing, right? It's hard to manage passwords, and you may wanna, you know, bring in some, password management software. Their password management software for individuals, their password management software for businesses. Businesses allows a super admin to without knowing the password, but able to manage your employee's password essentially. You may wanna have some kind of service, and by the way, you know, Team Logic IT, we can help you with all these things, but, you may wanna, you know, have some kind of service to kind of watch for, weird activities that may be happening, so, you know, fail login attempts, especially if you have a internet facing website and all that stuff. And, you know, you may wanna have somebody, a third party, so you have an IT provider today, you may wanna have an independent assessment of your network, you know, periodically, just make sure they're doing their jobs. All right. So now comes kind of a little bit of I'm gonna start jumping around now, just talk about some of the, you know, topics that you may be hearing. So how many people know what ransomware is? How many people have been hit by ransomware? You have?
Not personally, but organization I
You
work
know,
for.
yeah. Ransomware is nasty. Ransomware came out about 3 years ago. You know, so essentially what it does is, once introduced in the environment, it encrypts all your data, right? So it can start with one of the machines, and if you have a network, you know, file share, it will start encrypting the local files as well as that file share. And, you know, as it goes through encrypting, you know, it will eventually pop up a message like this, which basically say, hey, you know, I just encrypted all your files, you wanna get it back, you know, here's the instructions of how to send me some Bitcoin dollars. And if you don't send it to me, price is gonna go up, or, you know,
Delete everything.
you know, we're gonna start deleting everything. So this was a sort of a new way of sort of really getting money out of people. Because prior to ransomware, it was all about infiltrating and getting data, and then using that data, trying to figure out what to do with that data. So credit card information, bank information. This was a little bit of a game changer. So it was in the news quite a bit. Cryptoware is probably the latest thing. I don't know if you guys heard about this. So, you know, Bitcoin is all about Bitcoin mining. So you have to have a lot of computing power because it does a complex math equation to kind of generate Bitcoin dollars. And, you know, you have people that build warehouses full of machines to kind of run the processing. But another way of doing it is borrow somebody else's machine. So cryptoware is the latest thing. What they do is they infect your machine and they start running a fraction of a Bitcoin to generate Bitcoin for themselves. So imagine if you infect 1 million machines, you can actually generate a lot of money. It's a little innocuous, right? I mean, you know, so what? You know, I'm leaving my machine on at night, or I turn it off, they can't take advantage of it. So what? Yeah, just stealing a little bit of computing cycle, but the fact that they're now in your machine and they're taking control of your machine, they started figuring out they can do a lot more than just running the crypto mining. So they're starting to branch out. So other stuff, I'm just throwing a bunch of other stuff. So this is a little bit, this cuts across, this is useful at home, right? So your home computer, how many people have a normal account that you use all the time, and then an admin account that you use to install software or, you know, making system changes?
I don't know. My husband might.
I doubt it, actually.
Oh, okay.
I would say 99% of people. You buy a machine from Best Buy. You turn it on, and it asks you to enter a password. You're the only user on it. You just go with it, right? You have the admin account. You start using it, and pretty soon you can't. Next time you buy a machine, think about this, right? So the first account you create is your admin account, but then go in there and create a regular account where you do most of your work, and only log into your admin account to install software and whatnot. So this is another layer of protection, right? So if you get an email, you accidentally clicked it, a virus tried to come in and install it, half of the time, because you don't have admin credentials, you can't, it actually won't install. Yeah, so this is something I thought was interesting. It's an interesting thing that most people don't hear about or talk about. And you can do it in both Windows and Mac. Backup, right? You gotta, home. It's like business we kind of talked about, but home, you have something you want to keep, right? Your photos, your videos, your personal finance, your tax returns. So, you want to think about local backup as well as remote backup. And remote backup could take the form of, I know I mentioned I don't trust USB drives, but, hold on to that USB drive and use it to back up your stuff, and maybe, have two, back it up, once a week or however frequently you want. And then bring it to your office, right? So kind of rotate it so you have an outside just in case fire or whatever. Backup version, backup frequency. Just think about when I talked about backup previously. With questions. All right, so we're coming towards the end. We talked about free wireless network, right? Open wireless network, or even when you're in the hotels, airport. Starbucks. You can get, guest pass, So one of the things at home, right? One of the things is if you're at home, you want to make sure you have a guest wireless, right? So
Yes.
so somebody, your kid's friend comes to your house, only give them that one. So that, and then you put the rest of your household computers on the production line, right? So use different password, gets access. The last point is be careful in connecting to public Wi-Fi, right? When it's free, when it's unprotected like this, really think hard. Unfortunately, when you go to like a hotel, a lot of them are like that. And they have some other way of collecting your credential, but not at the wireless connection point. So it's something that, if you travel a lot, if you utilize, these sort of public Wi-Fi a lot, I would recommend getting a VPN. A VPN. So this VPN is different from, the VPN I use to remote into your office. You have public VPNs that, as soon as you connect, it encrypts the data. Because this is what happens if you don't. So this is just a very short video from 60 Minutes a few years ago.
It started when we logged on to the hotel Wi-Fi. At least it looked like the hotel Wi-Fi. Harry had created a ghost version. It's called spoofing.
I mean, this looks legitimate. It looks very legitimate. So you're connected? I am. And I have your email.
You have access to my email?
Yeah, it's coming through right now. I now have a ride-sharing application up here. All the information that's being transmitted, including your account ID, your mobile phone, which I just got the mobile number, then more importantly, I have all the credit cards associated with that account.
What did he do?
So he created a, so when you go into when you take your phone or laptop to a location and somebody says, okay, sign on to, let's say, Marriott,
Yeah.
this Wi-Fi called Marriott. And you bring up a list of Wi-Fi access points, and sure enough, there's something called Marriott there. Well, what you don't know is if that's the real Marriott access point, or is somebody sitting right next to you spoofing, because you can create a Wi-Fi access point and call it anything you want.
Got it.
Right, just like at your home, you can call your
A hotspot, yeah.
you can call your
Wow.
access point, hotspot, anything you want, right? And you could call it Marriott. And if you live right next door to Marriott, you could call it Marriott, and you can stick a computer on your network and start monitoring. People can start, because how would they know, right? You log in, and if you know what the Marriott sign-on screen look like, you can present the same sign-on screen. You can, whatever information they provide, you let them on, and then now that they have access to the internet through your access point, and because you're right there, you can look at every single piece of data that flows through it. Right? So this is why it's, you have to do it. I mean, you're away from your office and you need to get on the internet, right? So when all possible, use the phone tethering, right? Get on the internet, and you have to use a public Wi-Fi, and if you do that often enough, get a VPN.
So if you have unlimited Wi-Fi on your phone through your carrier, you're not going on public. You're going on the carrier's Wi-Fi?
Yeah, so cell phone Wi-Fi is encrypted to the cell tower.
Okay.
So the key thing is that the traffic has to be encrypted. So if people intercept it, they don't know what's going on. But when you connect to an open Wi-Fi like that, it's you're at their mercy, right? So they set one up and you connect to it, you're at their mercy.
So it's worth it to pay for unlimited Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It's worth it, but like I said, sometimes you can't. You
Don't have cell signal.
Yeah, you have no cell signal. Because at the end of the day, there's probably a cap on how much your hotspot could operate, and it may slow down. So if you travel a lot for business, you're in hotels all the time. You don't, so. But in commerce, like I said, if you do travel all the time, subscribe to a VPN and make sure it's turned on automatically. And that's kind of it. I timed it perfectly.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you talked about, you had somebody who had a spreadsheet of passwords.
Yes.
I have a spreadsheet of passwords for the chamber in our documents. So how?
So the first question is, why do you have it?
Because there's like
There's too many.
50 different ones. So they're all written out, and I inherited that process. So it's there in the computer. I guess if somebody hacked in, they could probably find it. So what's your advice on that?
Is that
Well,
encrypted?
Yeah.
No,
Itself.
it's just a Word document. Well, I'm sure our computers are encrypted because we're PCI compliant, so we have to go through
I
all
do
that.
have it too in my office. That.
But
Yeah. So.
and Regis and I are going to meet and talk.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely talk. So we talked about access management, right? And the whole topic of access management, again, you have to think about, why do you have to keep all that account? Is there a different way of managing access?
Right.
Because, tracking every single, username and password is obviously one way of doing it, but it exposes you to so much
That's
risk.
what I'm thinking, right?
So, we probably need to look at the reason behind why you're doing it, and then maybe, it's almost centralized management is always better. So but if you're sole distributed, you don't have any way of centralized management of your access. Then we need to kind of strip it down.
Well, I'm the centralized management, so.
I'm talking about system. Well, you're a big risk.
We'll talk.
So on that same topic of password security, so I use an Excel file, an encrypted Excel file for all of my various accounts. And I don't use the same password for anything. So there's no way I'm remembering 50 different passwords on 50 different sites.
Yep.
So I currently use an Excel sheet that's encrypted. But we're talking about some password management software. What is?
So for individuals, I recommend LastPass. LastPass. LastPass is they have a free one. So they have a free version for individuals, and you should just start with that. For business, Dashlane is probably the best.
Dashlane?
Yeah. Dashlane, I don't believe has a free version. But for individuals,
It's not expensive though.
Huh?
It's not terribly expensive.
Yeah, relatively speaking, none of this stuff is
Right.
that expensive. But I would start with LastPass. Yeah.
So how now? The skeptic in me is, how secure are they? Do they now?
A lot more secure than your spreadsheet.
Yes, but I mean, I guess
How does it work? How does
my
it
thought,
work?
no, theoretically, would somebody at LastPass potentially be able to get into my account now? Now they have.
That's
That's the internet.
it's
Yeah.
always possible, right? So you think about Amazon Cloud, right? You can go and spin up a server there. Well, their sysadmin would have access. If your business contract with us, my guys will have access, right? And there's but then there ultimately there's gonna be some people involved. So what you then need is a lot of the monitoring controls, right? So that if somebody went into your data when they don't have a good reason to, right? So my guys, they can only access our client system with a ticket behind it. There's always a reason, and if we couldn't correlate an access to a ticket, then it kind of raise a red flag. So you kind of have to have technology control, but you also have to have sort of monitoring control for the balance. But you encrypt your Excel spreadsheet using the internal encryption.
Correct.
Right. That's
Correct.
really weird. You can download a program and you can crack any Excel spreadsheet in less than an hour. Yeah, that's so yeah, I mean,
How about
it's better than
lock in your
nothing.
desk?
Now, physical, right? So it's not
Physical
connected
security
to the
versus-
internet. Yeah, it's actually pretty good security
Yeah.
when you think about it.
Right.
You have less exposure actually.
It's under key in a locked
Yeah.
container.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I heard this morning on CNBC that there's a whole new wave of phishing attacks going on that's a little more sophisticated.
There's always a new way.
Yeah.
of
Always a new
attack.
way. Yeah, but I guess they're really going after the small business, so.
Well, so there's been phishing attacks that are more directed, and that's so when you broadcast out a phishing attack to the world, right? You're casting a big wide net, and what you're hoping is some percentage will come back. The other tactic is focus on chambers, focus on defense industry, and then you can craft your message a lot more specific. So like if you want to target defense engineers, if I want to target defense engineers, the first thing I would do is talk about something they're familiar with, like DFARS compliant. Right? You have to click this link to validate your DFARS compliance, and that's something that's specific to that industry, and it kind of
It's credibility.
it's a lot more credibility, right?
Hmm.
Or one of the so two of my clients actually forwarded me almost the same phishing email recently. There's one going on right now that's that they couple the stolen credentials, right? So they would actually put your stolen credentials, so your username and your password, in the email. Now, whether or not that's a valid credential, they don't care, right? They took it off of the dark web, and they you know, you have your email address, so they sent that email and they show you the password that they got. And then they basically said, you know, we've hacked your account, we've taken control of your computer, and we were able to monitor your activities for a while now, and we have video of you visiting certain type of websites.
I get those on the chamber email, dear Vivian.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's X-rated websites that they
Yeah,
claim I
yeah,
go
and they
to,
want
and I
you
just
to-
laugh and delete.
They want you to send them, you know, a few cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, they always want money, 300,
A
800.
couple of my clients were actually, one of them was like, he was in a panic, and I didn't ask him why.
Well, I don't have a video, I don't have a camera on my computer, so I know it's a hack. And I don't go to those websites anyhow, and I'm not Vivian. So, but I don't have a camera on my computer, so I just laugh at the emails.
You
Really?
can imagine.
Oh, yeah,
I can
somebody
only imagine
did.
one of my clients.
Not me. Delete.
I was,
That's hilarious.
it was hard for me to kind of.
But that's a new one. I've been getting those recently, but they're
Yeah,
always
that
addressed to
that one's
Vivian.
pretty popular right now.
Yes.
How do you stop? I go to a lot of networking events, and how do you stop when they just automatically add you to some list? Like I at least unsubscribe on a daily basis, anywhere between 2 to 5 of things that I know I haven't signed up.
Yeah.
How do you stop that? Is there a
You
way?
can't stop it.
Okay.
You can kind of, well, two ways you can do it. You can have 2 email accounts, right? And one you give out, and then, you know, because when you give out an email account to people that you don't really know, they can do anything they want with it, right? So then that email account may be the account that you just,
The spam account.
I see.
the more spam account. The other thing you can do is actually a lot of those email come from paid services, and you know, the email that you use, it depends on, you know, you could subscribe to a spam filtering service that could filter out some of the spam. But the problem is you know, if I have your email address,
Right.
and I decide to send you a promotion material, you know, every month directly, there's nothing you can do about it, because this is
Right.
between, you know, Regis and Patty.
Right.
And no matter what kind of, you know, how good your spam filtering.
Is that proper etiquette though? Because I don't, when I collect business cards, I don't add anyone that I meet. Because I'm very mindful of that. Because unless I specifically have called that person and asked them, may I? But I don't add anyone to any list, because so is there etiquette about that? There should be, I feel
That's a
like.
whole
'Cause
different
I've literally gotten on the phone and someone, oh, did you? I said, yeah, I gave you my card, but I never signed up.
Etiquette is one thing. There's actually
Enforcing it is something else.
There's actually a law. You can't enforce etiquette, right? I mean, you know, you can't enforce etiquette, but it's actually a spam law. So if you do reply without subscribe, the sender need to are accountable for not ever sending it to you.
Oh, so there is a law.
If they're based in the U.S.
Just like,
If they're not, if they're
Yeah, it's a U.S. law.
Right.
It's called spam law.
but just like faxes that you used to get from, and you have to unsubscribe.
Yeah.
If you unsubscribe and they continue to send them to you, you can.
Right.
Can't you configure things like Outlook or your mail management system in order to basically cipher that off to a
Yeah, if you
folder
know-
somewhere?
yeah,
So you wouldn't even necessarily need to have a second email address, but if it's coming from SurveyMonkey or Constant Contact,
Yeah. If you have a list, right? If you have a list of folks that you just don't want, like automatically.
but as far as like
go
the
to
server,
trash.
who's doing the broadcasting, like the automated marketing material types, you know, Constant Contacts, for example, that could be funneled, right? Would you be able to identify that's a Constant Contact versus I actually wanted an email from you that came from you direct versus through your marketing people?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, you can use the Outlook filtering function to filter out known.
Yeah, and just put it into another
known
folder and
sources.
check it at your leisure.
But oftentimes, you know, these are not the constant contacts. These are, you know, other vehicles. But you could build out that list, right?
Yeah,
over
build a
time.
database of the no-nos.
Yeah.
I have a question. The PCI compliance stuff that I'll get, occasionally I'll get an email saying, you have an item you need to do work on.
Yeah.
And I can click on their link there, or I can go to the website directly and sign in and do it that way. That's the better way to go, because if
Well,
somebody spoofed
Yeah,
exact
so,
compliance and I clicked on the link,
so you hover
hover over
before
it and
you
see where
click,
it
right?
goes.
Hover it, and you can carefully examine
Okay,
the link address, or you can actually, I think you right click and copy the link address, and then paste it onto your browser. But before you click
just see what.
return, just read it.
Okay,
You want to be real. You want to be kind of careful, because I've seen spoofed spoofed website addresses that look very, very close to the real one.
Okay.
So because you can replace, let's say, an L with a 1, right? And you can actually use some European character that's not exactly, like A would look kind of weird, but it almost
It's like a Russian name.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know the alphabet, but I've seen those. So be careful. You just like give it a few more, a couple more seconds. Just like before you click,
Right.
give it 2 to 3 seconds. Other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
appreciate your time. Thank you. I have some pins and posters. That poster is actually